All right, you grasshoppers. Well, I guess we'll call this a midday podcast. That handsome gentleman there is Mark Roseman, and he's actually a very famous dude. You guys, a lot of people may not know his face, but he's very famous. A lot of sports books, a lot of Ranger books. How many books have you written?
This will be 6. The one that comes out the end of this week will be the 6th, and I'm starting on my 7th. Right.
So tell us the other books you've done. What are the other titles of the other books?
All right. So the very first one. So the whole genesis of writing the books was that I covered the New York Rangers and I covered the New York Mets. I hosted a radio show, and I sit next to Howie Carpin, who is a longtime Met official scorer and Yankee official scorer, and he also covers the Rangers as well. And we're sitting there, and he said, you should write a book. I go, I'm not really a writer. I'm more, a guy that asks questions, and I like to hear what other people say as opposed to me writing, about stories and stuff. He goes, well, we can do that. And over the course of the radio show for many years, these different authors would send books because they wanted to be on the show. And I got this one book called Facing Mariano. And it was basically a book where the person interviewed 150 players that faced Mariano Rivera. And they talked about how they approached it and what they actually did against him. So I said, we could do this, Howie, because it was coming on the 10th year of the shootout, the anniversary of the shootout. So I said, we could do like the history of the evolution, starting with the penalty shot. We could talk about the NBC showdown, and we could talk about, how players, forwards prepare for the shootout, how goalies prepare. And the thing morphed into this book, and towards the end, it was during the Rangers Stanley Cup final run. So we had access to every GM that was up there and all the scouts during the playoffs. And we would just ask all the different GMs if they could pick one shooter and one goalie, who would it be? And that turned out to be like one of the most phenomenal chapters. Glenn Sather basically said, he said, Mike Bossy. I turned to him. I said, Glenn, I said, you were the GM and coach of the greatest player in the history of hockey, and you're not taking Gretzky, you're picking Bossy? And I told Bossy that, and Bossy said, yeah, well, why didn't he draft me? So that was the first book. The second book was on Kiner's Corner. If you're from New York, you know that show. It was the post-game show of the Mets. Then we did Rangers by the Numbers, which was every single Ranger in number order, a little history of each of those. And then we got down to what was the genesis of my true love of hockey, the 1979 New York Ranger team. We did a book called Before 94 because we kind of felt that had the Rangers not won in 94, that the 79 team would probably be the most beloved team in Ranger history, just because of the fact they overachieved and all the characters on that team. So we did a whole book on the 79 Rangers. And then I did a book with my co-host, AJ Carter, called Glove Story, because I'd coached my son in travel ball for 9 years. He's now 30. And I realized that I spent more time off a field now than on a field. And it was just the bond that baseball creates between father and son. And for his 30th birthday, I took him down to Met Fantasy Camp. So instead of being his coach, he was a teammate of mine. And it was that. And now the book that's coming out Friday is, in all the years I've been doing the radio show, it always struck me as unbelievable the actual detail that a player could tell you, his first game, his first goal, the day he got drafted. So I wanted to do a Ranger book because it's my passion. And so we interviewed 62 Rangers, including yourself, and chronicled their first NHL idol they had, the day they were drafted, their first game, the first time putting on the Ranger jersey, first time they were traded from the Rangers and coming back to the Rangers, first hat trick, first playoff experience, so many great things. And we're just tracking down different guys, and it runs the gamut from superstar to guys like Del Puritan, who was great.
Mike Allison on there too.
Mike Allison is in there. Yeah.
It's all time.
Yeah. And also talking about their first captains, and and I love Bubba. Barry Beck, I think probably was the actual. Now, I think my first jersey was a Don Maloney, but I think the next jersey I had was Bubba. And whenever I speak to Barry, I tell him at that point I think the jerseys at Kazu was $90. I said, "You owe me $90." He goes, "Why?" I go, "Because I bought a number 3 jersey, and you change your number to 5, and then it becomes useless." Yeah. So, but what I found about Bubba, and I love Bubba, but like in speaking to all these guys that he was their first captain, the universal love and admiration they have for Barry as a captain was unbelievable. And I didn't really know that. That was one of the things I got out of it, that I was, really, I was glad to find that out because I always liked him as a player.
Yeah, he's very well respected in the locker room. He just had that presence about him too. It's hard to put anybody up there in the category of Mark Messier and his presence and everything. But Bubba had that, right? When he walked in the room, there's feel like we're protected now. He's the leader. There's no question he was the boss. So we were involved in the 100 Greatest Rangers too. You were involved in that?
My hockey beat reporter on my radio show, Russ Cohn, was part of 100 Rangers Great with John Halligan before he passed away. And
yes.
Adam Rader, I think, is the other author.
Yeah. It was funny. They called me for that book. I was very honored to be, I think it was 87th or something. And to start off, I don't know if you do this or not. I've only spoken to you doing your book. But they had this young guy get on the phone, kind of doing some preliminary work, let me know that I was on the list. And I was with my sons at the time, so it's many years ago, and they're 26 and 29 now. And I was in a goofy mood, I guess, as I usually am. But he called up. He says, "Oh, you're on the book." And I said, "So what number am I wearing?" And he's kind of hesitating because I'm not like number 5 or something like that. He says, "Well, you're 87th." And I was just joking with him. I really didn't mean it. I said, "What?" Like I was outraged. I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm 87th." Meanwhile, I'm just happy I'm on the list. And my sons were just going nuts. They thought it was really funny. And I didn't go on too long. The poor kid was just traumatized, I think, because I was yelling at him. But I stopped and told him I was joking. But it was.
But you think about that. I mean, to be in the top 100 of the Ranger franchise is unbelievable, and you well deserved as well. But that's saying something.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was a real honor. Yes.
Evidently, they never saw that cover of the program with you in that cowboy hat.
I know. I remember I first came to New York. I had the cowboy boots and the cowboy hat and the whole bit. So I just thought I was still at the back of the farm. Hey, you know what is interesting? And obviously you know this, and I've learned this over the years, but I don't know if it's like this in every city or not. But when I played with the Rangers, obviously I knew how much the fans loved the Rangers and the players. But I don't think I fully understood it until I came back after I was retired. And I was on a beach up in Greenwich, Connecticut, someplace. A bunch of us were fooling around playing Frisbee or something like that. And somebody yelled my name. And this gentleman gets up out of the sand, big guy, and he starts running towards me. And I'm thinking like, oh, what did I do? Like, did I do something to this guy or whatever? And I look down, he's got 2 Ranger tattoos on each leg. And he's this big guy. He's all sweaty. He's coming over. He's hugging me and everything, And it was funny at the time, but it really was a reminder. Yes, the Ranger fans maybe are not as big in numbers as the Giants or Yankee fans and everything, but man, their dedication to the team is incredible, right? And it goes on like people have been around for a long time. They love talking about the 80-81 team with the brawl we had against the Kings and everything. So it's amazing how Ranger fans are just incredible with their dedication.
It's interesting because I always wondered if the Rangers had won cups so first of all, I grew up on Long Island. Okay. So, and, I grew up in New York Islander territory, but I started following hockey before the Islanders were in existence. So like for me, anyone that was an Islander fan that was my age was basically, not a true fan because they left the team they were a fan of to root for the Islanders. And granted, the Islanders weren't good when they jumped, but I always wondered the pain that Ranger fans went through. Like even that 79, as great as that was, and all those years, having to get past the Bruins and not doing it, if that's similar to what the Red Sox fans do, because when you get that close, or the Cubs, I think that might be part of why we are so deep entrenched in that. It was that wait till next year, just like the Brooklyn Dodgers. Those teams that always were close that didn't win were the teams with the fan base that really bleed the colors of their team. And I think for me, for sure, growing up on Long Island, beating the Islanders in 79 was unbelievable, but then having to endure those 4 years when they won the cup was brutal. And, then things turn and we're back on top for a while and, things keep turning.
I tell people too, the Garden is one of the most fantastic places to play. But one of the things you need to get used to, and I saw it at the start of this past season, actually, with a lot of the young kids with this current team. And I love the way this team's put together. But Ranger fans, they voice their opinion, right? If you're not playing well, they're going to say something, or you can just sense it in the building, like it's the groaning and moaning almost, And as a young player, you don't want that directed towards you. You want all that stuff. So sometimes the tendency is, and it's funny now thinking about it, because you should exactly do the opposite. But the tendency is to try to not do too much so you stand out. You don't want to be the target of the fans booing at you. But I can just see it happening now with young kids. I'm thinking back to the days when it was happening to me. And then you figure out, listen, the Ranger fans, yes, they don't want you to make mistakes, but they'll accept mistakes as long as you are going all out to make an effort. Like if you're not playing hard, then you're going to get it. But the same thing goes. They'll give it to you, but then 2 minutes later, you make the right play. They're your family. They love you. It's like, that's really what it is, right? It's a family feeling.
It's funny you say that, because I obviously a lifelong fan, and now I cover the team. So, and I had season tickets for many years, and I'd be the first to be up there. I was probably probably more brutal on Tom Poti than anybody else. Even in our range, it's funny because sometimes when you write the books, you forget a little bit, and we were kind of honest in the Rangers by the numbers, and what we wrote about Poti was not. We didn't trash him. It was the truth. As far as the Rangers, they thought he was a missing piece. He was a disappointment for them. But he, whatever. So I reached out for him for this book, and evidently he had bought the other book. Wow. And he wrote, "I don't know why you'd want me. I was a big disappointment." But he used the words of the Rangers. But the point of it is like, I'll be on the train after covering game and after being in the locker room, and it's the way the trains are situated. It's the first train back. I have enough time to go in the locker room, do coach, do my stuff, and be on that train. And I'll hear people, trash talking Mark Stahl, and a lot of times I bite my tongue. And then I turned to him. I said, "You don't realize what Mark Stahl means to this team." I said, "You don't realize the effect he's got on these young defensemen." He goes, "But why is he out there in the last 4 minutes of a game?" I said, "Because he's defensively responsible, and they have their favorites, and it's tough, because I know what it was like when you were a fan. You just look at that one microcosm of one game. If a guy gives up the puck, a perfect example is probably your first game as an NHL player. If someone was sitting in the stands, your first goal as a Ranger was actually against the Rangers, right?"
That's right. Yes. I shot it off John David. We're in Boston. That's right. You remember the story. I'll never forget this too. And we want to get to your book a little bit, but I'll tell this real quick story. First of all, I got a great question from this George Marino. Is asking me, do you like playing in front of a fan base that will get on you? And the answer is definitely yes. You don't like it at first, but then once we're talking now, once you understand what their passion and how much they love the team. So the answer is yes to that question. But so you dream all your life of playing in the National Hockey League, growing up in Canada and everything. And, you go through training camp. I had a good training camp. Still with the team. And back in those days, they really didn't come and tell you like some big ceremony that you'd made the team. They just tell you, okay, go get a place to live. And that was the signal that you'd made the team. So that hadn't happened yet for me. We were playing our first game in Boston, and Boston Garden's an intimidating place, right? I mean, I was supposed to be a big, tough physical defenseman, and they had, Terry O'Reilly and Wayne Cashman, Stan Jonathan, John Wensick, and everything. You're going, oh my God, And John Davidson was this larger than life figure. He played such a huge role in the team going to the finals in '79, and he had that personality too. So he's one of those guys you just kind of look to to kind of embrace you, to make you feel good about being on the team and everything. So you want to try to do all the right things for him. First period in Boston, and I get the puck on the left side, and they have pressure coming at me. So I just want to ring it around behind the net, get it over the winger on the right side of the boards. And in my enthusiasm, I banked it right off the back of JD's leg into our net. And JD looked at me through his mask, and I swear to God, like he wanted to kill me. Right? It's like, what are you thinking? And it's you go back to the bench, and you're looking for support or whatever, and there's nothing anybody can say to you. It's not like they can give you some. It's not like it's a teaching moment, like Tom, don't do that. You obviously you don't do it, right? It's like, so nobody talks to you on the bench, and I'm thinking, oh God, I'm terrible. That's it. My career's over with. And so next night, Freddie Shearer was our coach. So next night we go into Toronto for my second game, and again, nobody talks to me. Because, I had an okay game the rest of the game, but the play was stupid. And we get into Toronto, and Freddie had told myself, Eddie Hospodar, and Chris Katsopoulos, he says, you're not going to play the first 5 minutes of each game. You're not going to play the last 5 minutes of each game. You're all 6'2", 210, 215 pounds. I'm not telling you to fight, but what do you think you can do to help this team? So Robert Picard was a great guy, had a great career. He's playing for Toronto, and I'm carrying the puck to the neutral zone at Maple Leaf Gardens. right where I grew up. My parents are in the stands and everything. Real proud moment. And Robert Picard butt ends me and knocks me down. And our bench jumps up. And I'm thinking, I cannot let this happen, especially after what happened last night. So I stood up and I just drilled him at center ice. And I knocked him out cold at center ice at Maple Leaf Gardens. And Daryl Sittler, who I had grown up watching play, is on the ice at the same time. He's starting to skate towards me. And I'm thinking to myself, I want to get Daryl's autograph. This is my thought process while I'm out there. And then, the F-bombs are flying back and forth. And we're going, there I was, telling Daryl Sittler what he should be doing. And after the game, they told me to get a place. So, that was the big one. So, all right, we got to get on your book here. I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, a lot of passion into it. So you've talked to 62 different players. Yeah. And the first, it's all about their first, right? Whether it's a first goal, first hat trick,
first game they went to as a kid, which was pretty cool. Aaron Burrows was a Ranger fan growing up, and his first game that he ever went to was the Vancouver Canucks New York Rangers finals. And he was a huge Mark Messier fan, and he went to the game in a Mark Messier jersey, and he stopped at his grandfather's house because he wanted a camera. And he said there's actually footage, he said, of the pregame skate on the television. He was down there with his Messier jersey, and he took all these pictures during warm-ups. And, after the game, he couldn't wait to get home and get the film developed. And he, went to open up the camera to take the film out, and there was no film in the camera. So that was his first game ever. So just little things like that you learn from players. Pat Hickey talking about his first training camp. And when he got there, Rod Gilbert challenged him to a race. He told him, "Oh, I hear you're pretty fast, Hitch. I bet you can't beat this old man." And Hickey loved, Gilbert, growing up and everything. So he says, "I'll bet you 100." And Hickey, didn't really know what to do as a rookie. He said, "All right." So he made Carroll. I think it was Vadnais held the money. I'm not sure who the person that held the money was. And Vadnais says, "On a mark, get set, go." And Hickey just tears out, and Gilbert's just standing there, doesn't move. Hickey comes on back, and then Vadnais hands Gilbert the money. And then he goes, "Thanks, Rook," and walks away. So that was Hickey's indoctrination into the Rangers. He said it was pretty funny. Just like weird first. And they're not really first because John Muckler, you kind of find little tidbits out. So Muckler was Wayne Gretzky's last coach in Wayne Gretzky's last game. So I asked him, what it was like being his coach, and he had been his coach in Edmonton as well. First, he said that last season was sad because he really didn't want Wayne to retire. But then he told me something which I had never seen anywhere before and never seen it written. And he said that last game with like a minute, he said his daughter was pregnant at the time and expecting a child. He told the Rangers public relations person, who he believes at the time was the same one that's currently there. And I asked him, he didn't really remember. He vaguely remembered something to that effect. He said that if my daughter gives birth during the game, I want you to come down and tell me on the bench. So with like a minute 23, word got down to Muckler that his daughter had a boy, and Muckler calls timeout. And he calls Wayne over to the bench because Wayne was out for the last shift. Now, everyone, he said, in rewriting this history and talking about this game, always felt that Muckler called that timeout so Wayne could come to the bench one more time, skate back out of center ice, and get this huge ovation. But that's not why he called the timeout. He said, "Wayne, I'm now a grandfather. I want you to go out and score a goal for my grandson."
That's great.
And Wayne looks at him and he goes, "Coach, 6 years ago, stood a shot." He goes, "No chance in hell it's happening now." So that was pretty cool. And also, Muckler's first two coaching jobs were in the East Coast Hockey League with the Ducks, and his two goaltenders in those first 2 years, the first year was Gilles Villemure, and the second year was Sal Red Light Messina. So he had this kind of link to the Rangers even before he had a link to the Rangers, which I thought was pretty cool. Rick Middleton's first game, he scores his 2 goals, and he didn't remember them at all. So I wanted to try and track down. With YouTube, you could almost find anything. And I figured I stood a great chance of finding it because Middleton scored his first 2 goals ever in the first game, official franchise history of the Washington Capitals. So I figured, all right, the Capitals' first game, the Capitals have to have some archive of it. And I contacted the Capitals. They don't have it. And there's nothing out there. And even in their their tribute videos of their history, they don't have it. And I was kind of bummed because he didn't remember him, and he would have really loved to see those goals.
Right.
So that was interesting. Dave Maloney, his first fight, he fought the same guy 3 times. In the first fight he got into, he fought the guy 2 more times in that same game. And you never think of Dave Maloney having 3 fights in a game.
Who did he fight? Who was it? Do you remember?
It was someone on the California Golden Seals, someone that was not, nondescript guy. It wasn't a tough guy by any means. And then some of the more current players like Sean Avery, which I had a very good relationship with Sean, and people don't realize how really deep and intelligent when he starts talking. And he talked about his first film role, which he actually played a New York Ranger in a Rocket Richard movie. And he talked about the way they made that movie. They made them wear all the old 1950s hockey equipment and use the old hockey sticks. And he said that it was an eye opener for him. The way to skate with that equipment was so different. And just the current guys, obviously, Henrik, who, I've had the honor of, having been able to cover his entire career to this point. And it was interesting because, I went up to practice, and it was this season, and the person before me that got him, during the practices, you get more one-on-ones. So the guy who did the interview with Hank before me kind of was making this article of, equating, Hank's season this year to Eli's season, Eli Manning, and
right.
Moving out of the way for the younger player. So it kind of took a few minutes to get Hank out of that bad frame of mind, because it wasn't, I still think he's one of the best in the league. And, I think some of the criticism he gets is unfair, and considering what he's done for this franchise. But, we talked about his first game against his brother, the Olympic experience, and the first Stanley Cup final game, and things like that. Marty St. Louis talked about that Mother's Day, his first Mother's Day goal. Just so many different guys. Eddie Shack is just the first Ranger to actually, although it was when he was a Maple Leaf, but have a song written about him. Clear the Shack, here comes Eddie Shack. So some really interesting. Don Luce wasn't a Ranger for long, but Gordie Howe was his idol growing up. He tells a Gordie Howe story. Just so many different players. Mike Hartman. And then the stars is Rod Gilbert, first, and I'm sure the only Ranger out of body experience. He talked about actually, him having a near death experience and hearing Emile Francis tell the nurse, "Bring him back. He's my best scorer." So it was some really good stuff. And his idol, Boom Boom Geoffrion, and how he turned his hatred towards his idol, and then later was a teammate of his. And so some really good stuff. It was a lot of fun. I mean, anytime you get to speak to 62 the guys that you grew up idolizing, it's always good.
Yeah, and I know we went back and forth about contacting some other guys, and the response was great. Like talking to them, there was no hesitation. They all wanted to talk to you. Really. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I see your Rick Nasters you got on. And if you can't answer, don't do it. It's going to get you in trouble. Who's your favorite Ranger all time?
Wow, favorite Ranger of all time. Okay, this is tough because I have so many. So for Nasher, I think number one really does not get the credit he deserves as a Ranger. I think that we expected him to come here and score 50 goals every year. But he became a better two-way hockey player than he ever was. And the way he killed penalties and the power play, I thought he was great. And then the concussion definitely changed the way he played his game. There's no question about that. But I will have to say, all right, and you are putting me on the spot because I have different eras of favorite players. Obviously, Rod is, one of my favorites. The entire 79 team, Nick Fotiu. When I played street hockey, my nickname, in fact, 90% of my high school yearbook, people wrote Nick instead of my first name because that's kind of the way I played. Got the knuckles to prove it. Let's see. But then, beginning to cover the team, and one of my dogs that just passed recently, his name was Yager. So Jaromir Yager was definitely one of my faves. Barry for sure, Ty Domi, Henrik, Brian Boyle. Just because of when I covered the team, I don't think you could find a more honest, more down-to-earth player than Brian Boyle. Just
really well-spoken guy too. And and thought out. Brandon Dubinsky, Ryan Callahan. They're also in the book. Callie was great, and Dubinsky. So
It's tough. I don't think I could come up with one because I love the team. It's this. That's the favorite. I don't think I dislike any guy that ever wore this jersey.
That was going to be my next question. So there's no guys that you dealt with that you say, oh God, I wish I didn't have to deal with that guy ever again. You don't name him if there is one, but
no, I can say that in baseball. I can definitely say it in basketball. Yeah. I don't think I can say that about any hockey player. And I've had this conversation. We've had this on the radio show because my co-host is not a big hockey fan. He likes basketball more. And I try to explain to him, I said, there's just a difference. I don't know if it's because, growing up, if you don't have the access to ice and your parents have to take you to the arena, you spend a lot of time with your parents, and your parents don't leave the arena once they're there because they're not going to come back. There's that time with your teammates, getting your equipment on. And it's a different bond, I think, that is inherent in hockey. And from a U.S. perspective, at least for me, I found that even playing it, it's different. It's different scoring a goal than hitting a home run.
And I've been fortunate doing all my True Grit Life stuff. I've got to know a lot of Navy SEALs and how they think, and their whole. It's all about team, right? Like they talk about when they're firing their weapon, they're not firing to protect themselves; they're firing to protect their teammate, and that's so everybody does that. You're all counted on to do that. And I'm not trying to in any way compare hockey to going to war, but I think it's kind of that same mentality that everybody has a job to do out there. And a lot of times it's not a scripted job. You have to make decisions out there that your teammates are counting on you to make the right decisions. So I think there's so much of that bonding that goes in there because like I need to know that I can trust that guy. And especially back in like the 70s and 80s and 90s, that included, all the guys sitting around and having beers together too, right? I mean, the guys are much more aware of their bodies now and what they should and shouldn't do. We were more, it was just like, we're all together. Like if we were going to go together, I don't know if you saw the other day, we had the Nick Fatigue.
Absolutely.
Dave on. Yeah. And it was a blast. It was telling the old stories, and the Ranger fans loved it and everything. So we're going to do it again this Thursday, actually, too. We get a secret guest coming in, so we'll see what it is. But yeah, I agree with you. The culture around hockey is that whole team atmosphere, and treating people with respect too, whether it's members of the media, fans, even the opponents. You do anything to win. You'll break your arm if you have to, but you treat them with respect too. So
I want to put you on the spot though.
Okay.
Right? Who was your favorite teammate as a Ranger?
Oh man, that is a tough one. It's funny. We're talking a number of them. Like the guys like Gresh and I got close. Don Maloney and I were roommates. Dave and I were friends. Guys like Mike Allison. He and I started together. We were both rookies, and just like a funny man. Like I felt bad. He's always got injured all the time, but we played together in Los Angeles too at the end of my career. And he was just one of those guys that really unsung all-team guy, but he would score some big goals sometimes. He's falling all over the place and battling and scraping and doing whatever. He was great. James Patrick was a great teammate. Wow. I don't know if there would be one guy because there's so many. Big Willie Huber was a great guy too. We lost him, unfortunately, a few years ago, but he was a great guy. I'm the same as you. I think my memories of playing with the Rangers were just a lot of great guys. Like it's funny if you don't see a guy for a while. I saw Eddie Johnstone was another great guy too, and I hadn't seen him in a while. He was in some golf event at the start of the year, and he walked in. And it was just like it's like you kind of light up, right? Like there's just all the good memories you had from being around Eddie Johnstone.
It's so funny you mentioned those guys, and then there's like the guys that Lance Nethery.
Yes.
I love that. Rico Fata was a guy who I thought was going to be a great player. Speed, just couldn't finish, but there are guys like that you just love right away.
I'll tell you a Lance Nethery story really quick. So when I came to the Rangers, I'd finished my college season in Northern Michigan. We were ranked number 1 in the country. We'd gone to the national championship, lost the final game, went back up to Marquette, Michigan for about a week. They negotiated my contract. I was coming in to sign my contract, and I was going down to New Haven to play in the playoffs there. So came to New York, signed the contract, go to New Haven, go on my first practice. And it was so cool that I thought it was like, because in college, you got to wear a helmet all the time, like even at practices. And I thought it was so cool that I was going to be a pro player and I didn't have to wear a helmet in practice. First drill we do, I'm the first man up. The drill it's a breakout drill. So somebody's got to dump the puck in. So I'm standing there. Lance Nethery fires one right off my forehead. I still got the scar here. Right? It's the first time without a helmet on, so I had to go get stitches there. That was last. He's good. He's went over to Europe and coached over there. I talked to him recently. But okay, so who's your favorite coach of all time then?
Wow. It's got to be the Cat. I grew up with him. It's got to be him. I can't in my heart say Keenan just because of the type of person he was, but he brought the cup. And Shiro was just you didn't. I was 18, 19 at the time, and no one ever really got to know. Even the players really never got to know Freddie. A guy who I loved, just respected the hell out of him, and it was one of the questions of some of the core guys I asked, and I think he doesn't get enough credit. Everyone turns to Torts as laying the foundation for AV to get them to the finals, but people don't realize that a lot of those young players, including Henrik and the Stalls and the Girardis and Callahan and Dubinsky, all came up through Tom Rennie. And I think Tom doesn't get the respect he needed in Ranger history. I think he was a huge guy. I like Tom a lot.
Yeah, you're really good hockey mind. Probably, I didn't always agree totally with. Like the way he, like the discipline part, like making people accountable. But man, what a smart hockey guy as far as knowing the game. I think you're right too. How about favorite general manager?
It's hard to say. The fact that Glenn brought Yager here, and Henrik is his draft pick, and got them to the finals. But you got to say something about Phil Esposito when it was never boring. You always knew you have to look at the transaction. This is before ESPN and the NHL Network. You'd always have to search the transactions because every 10 minutes Phil was making a trade just for the insanity of Phil's reign. Neil Smith because got the cup. So.
By the way, I think my favorite, my no question for me, my favorite coach was Herb Brooks. It was a early. I tell the story all the time. I love Herb now. Again, we've lost Herb, but I didn't always love Herb. But I've told his wife and family I've kept close to and everything. So I had my rookie year, a pretty good successful year. Freddie Shero was actually fired partway through my rookie year. Craig Patrick came in and took over the whole show. And we'd gone to that long run. We beat the LA Kings, beat St. Louis, and then ultimately lost to the Kings to the Islanders in the semifinals. So next year, you'd think if you go to the semifinals, you're going to stick to the team you've got. But obviously, Herb's coming in, and that's not the team he wanted. We were a big, tough, rugged team, and he wanted Rob McClanahan and Mark Pavlich and all those guys, and Ray Ruotsalainen. So Herb, as loved his speeches. So it's the day before our first game, which would be obviously Herb's first game. We're at Rye Plain Land of practice. We finished practice. He gets us together at neutral zone, and he's going through the whole team and giving us all, his expectations, what everybody's role is. And he gets to me right near the end, and he goes, Laidlaw, when you get the puck, give it to somebody else. You're not supposed to have it. Right for the whole team. And I'm mortified. I'm thinking, what? That's what you think of me, And the guys are dying laughing. And I found out later on that it was, he felt I was tough enough mentally to handle it. And it was one of his things to do to kind of bond the guys together. And it worked. I mean, the guys are all dying laughing at me. And it was actually a good message for me too, because that was the player I needed to be. The less I had the puck, the better. And it was like, get the puck up to somebody else. You play defense and do all that stuff. So Herb was the best for me. Craig Patrick was a great GM too for me. I thought he proved even how much of a better GM he was once he went to Pittsburgh too.
Oh, yeah.
Going ahead and hiring Scotty Bowman and Bob Johnson at the same time. A lot of GMs don't want to do that because they think, well, those guys are going to take my job, right? But Craig was strong enough to bring those guys in and had all the success.
Guys, for me, especially 1980, I'm 20 years old. What those two meant for USA Hockey, it was tremendous. And you mentioned Pav is in the book, and McClanahan and Bob Brook, a number of guys that played, for him. And it's, I've that team, the 1980 Olympic team, aside from the Rangers, is my favorite team. So I think at this point through the radio show, I've spoken to probably 90% of that team, and it always comes back to Herb and just the amazing stories and what a great teacher he was. And all of them talk that they've learned more about life from Herb than they did about hockey. And they all say they learned tons of hockey. So that's saying something about it.
And I concur with that. It was I tell everybody he had that saying, passes come from the heart, And for years I just thought he went out and practice. He would grit his teeth. He said, make it go on the guy's tape, just don't hope it goes on their tape. And so like I saw the passion in that, and I learned from that. But it's later on in life that I kind of figured out he's not just talking about passing the puck. He's talking about everything in your life. If you're going to do it, put your heart into it, right? So that's been a big part of kind of my mantra, I guess we'll call it. But so the book's all done. Thursday it's coming out.
Book is all done. It's I'm just waiting for obviously with everything that's going on in the world, the printers are I guess they're not essential, so they don't have as many people there. So I just have to make sure the proof copy looks good, and it should be on sale either Thursday or Friday this week for sure.
Okay, very easy. And where can people find it then?
Amazon. Just type in you never forget your first New York Rangers. Just type in my name, and all the books will come up as well.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun.
Tell me like the one thing that, let's say, surprised you the most doing the book, some comment from one of the players.
Let's see. Well, the one thing, obviously, the Roger Bear, I'd never heard the out-of-body experience that he went through. That was one of them. The universal respect as a captain that Barry Beck, all the guys that played under him. You mentioned Mike Allison. One of the things that you do research because you want to talk to him about things, and I know that Mike's brother played in the NHL, and he didn't play many games in the NHL. He only played one game against New York Rangers, and you mentioned Mike always being injured, and Mike missed playing against him by three games. But he said that he was able to dress for the pregame skate, so he sent me a picture of the two of them on garden ice together, which was, he says, is the only time they were ever, on the ice professionally. That was pretty cool. Let's see. There's just so many, the Hickey story I thought was great. Lucien Deblois, something that surprised me. Lucien Deblois' first Ranger roommate was Mike Eruzione.
Oh,
so, yeah, Eruzione was Ranger property prior to playing in the Olympics. He was got to try out. I think he was in the 78, 79. He was in the 78, 79 camp, New York Rangers. So he was Lucien Deblois' first Ranger roommate, which I thought was pretty cool. I think Eddie Mio, the first Ranger he came in contact was JD, picked him up at the Westchester Airport. Who was it? Rick Bennett. With this one really surprised me because and I'm sure it's true, and I couldn't track it down. He said when he was called up to the Rangers, he was driving in a cab, picked him up to take him to the training facility, and the cab driver was listening to Howard Stern, who was talking about Eric Bennett, saying, "Oh, the Rangers have got this new goon, Eric Bennett." And I said, Howard Stern talking hockey. I would have loved to hear that, but that was a little surprising. It was just great talking to all the guys.
The thing that I thought was really interesting when you and I spoke was, as you and I spoke, like I started to think about things that I never really would have thought about, and like you were bringing it out to me that, like, oh yeah, geez, I never thought of it that way, and it was.
You talked about where you were when you got drafted, and the way only you could put it is shovel an S.
Yeah. Oh, I've told that story a number of times too. That was fun. Well, just now the draft is such a big thing, right? All the students, and we'll see if it happens this year or not. But it's become such a big production. It's 2 days, and all the families come in a whole bit. But back in '78, when I was drafted, it was actually a 20-year-old draft, and most of the guys didn't even go. I kind of knew that there was a draft, but I really didn't think much of it. Nobody had contacted me. There was certainly no interviews or anything like that. And I was actually working on a horse breeding farm in Guelph, Ontario, a buddy's place, and it was a Saturday afternoon. We were cleaning the stalls out. The horses had done their business in the stalls. It was time to clean it out. And the Rangers had called my father at our farm. He then called this other family's farm. So they called me up to the farm, grabbed the phone. Obviously no cell phones. It's the phone on the wall. He says, the Rangers just called you drafting the 6th round. And I said, well, what do I do now? He says, well, get back out there and finish cleaning the ass out of the stall. So that was my draft day. It's funny now, especially as being an agent for 22 years, I tell this story to the kids and they're like, what? Like that was what it was. But it's like, I think it's actually a good thing. I think sometimes it's too much importance is put in the draft, either that you are going to be a player because you're a high draft pick, or that even if you weren't drafted or a low draft pick, that you're not going to be a player. I think it's, the draft is just part of the process for everybody. So, well, listen, so what's next then for books?
Well, wait, the one thing that now just did enter my mind, the one thing that really surprised me the most in the book was speaking to Stefan Matteau, and I asked him the different first. Was he more nervous for his son's first game than his first game? And he said way more nervous. But then I asked him, remembering his son's first goal, and he got really emotional. He actually said, "You're making me cry now." He basically he had taped the game, and no one told him, and he got home and he was watching it, and then he said he was jumping up and down on his couch. So that was pretty neat, talking to a father whose son scored in the NHL.
Well, I never played with Stefan, but we got to know him pretty well, doing a lot of Ranger alumni stuff. Great guy too.
Yeah.
Great humor, big heart, really good guy.
Right.
So what's the next project then?
So, I alternate my passions. So I did the kind of book and the glove story book. So I'm going back to the Mets, because the 79 Ranger book, it's interesting, from a publisher standpoint, what they feel sells. And I'm shocked at the 79 Ranger book. I mean, that book came out over a year ago, and every day people are buying copies of it, because it's strange. It's one team in the overall history of the team, 1 year in the overall history, but people that have a connection to it. So, a lot of love has been posted on the New York 69 Mets, but 1973 Mets is really the forgotten miracle, because that was the miracle. The 69 Mets were really talented. 73 Mets, not so much. In fact, one of the lowest winning percentages ever to make it to the World Series. So we're going to tackle the 1973 Mets. It's pretty cool because Willie Mays was part of it, and I found this great story about a golf tournament prior to the season, where it was like this huge celebrity golf tournament where like stars of every city were paired. So Willie Mays was paired with Joe Namath for this golf tournament, and Namath showed up like 40 minutes late because he probably had like about 4 or 5 women in his hotel room, and Mays refused to golf with him. And so that's a pretty neat story, and just a lot of things that were going on in New York in 73. So we think it will be a pretty decent book. That one's going to be called The Forgotten Miracle.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really like I love working with you, doing stuff, and the biggest thing I see, like one of my best friends, I think him, Kevin Allen, used to write with you.
Yeah.
I think you two have that same kind of thing. You carry yourself with a lot of class. You treat people with respect, but you really have a passion for the game too. And I think that really comes out. So great doing stuff with you. So you need more from me, please let me know. So good luck with the book on Thursday coming out.
I appreciate it, Tom, and I love what you're doing. I mean, especially now, it gives people, an hour and a half to not watch the news and get all depressed, and it's always uplifting. And I mean, ever since you told me about you getting up at 3 o'clock and doing, making the bed and doing those military type hikes, I'm trying to motivate myself a little bit too.
We'll get there bit by bit. It's all a process, right? We're not looking for perfection, just all process. All right, bud. Great talking to you.
All right, be good, Tommy. Thanks.